Hi, everybody. We have already a few people waiting for us online, so we will now officially be launching this event. We have all our panelists here with us in the room. Excellencies, dear colleagues, good afternoon to who is with us here at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in Geneva, in this beautiful room. Auditorium, should I say. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us on WebEx or is now watching the video of this event. The Geneva Environment Network is joining our hosts, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, as well as the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or known as IUCN, in welcoming you today for a policy dialogue on nature-based solutions in humanitarian context, ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference that will kick off next week in Dubai, which will hold for the first time ever a thematic day on relief, recovery, and peace. Our session today also follows a series of events that the Geneva Environment Network and IUCN co-organized in 2021 with many in cooperation with the intervention of many other stakeholders, including IFRC, with the aim to facilitate further engagement and discussion among the stakeholders in international Geneva and beyond on nature-based solutions in the lead-up to some critical environmental negotiations. This led, among other key milestones, to the adoption of a resolution at the United Nations Environment Assembly last year, defining the concept of nature-based solutions. And we continued discussions this year, co-hosting 2 additional events looking at decent work and unlocking finance. Before I hand over to our hosts, let me also remind you that the documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the event will be made available on the webpage of this event. This is still one of the most, the questions that often comes in the chat. And throughout the event, those who are online, because we have joined by many people online, can raise their questions by using the Q&A box, and we have a dedicated session to answer these after the presentations. You have also, for who is online, on the screen indication on how to access automated transcript in 100 languages. And with that, I will now hand over to our hosts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does it work? Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Daniela, for those warm words of welcome. This is indeed a hybrid event, so I'll focus a little bit more on what's happening today in the room in person. So it's a real pleasure for us to welcome you here at the IFRC. I'm Nicola Newman. I lead the climate work here at the IFRC. I also want to point out in the beginning, for those of you who are here in person, there will be drinks afterwards. So unfortunately, we will raise just a virtual glass for our colleagues online. And we very much encourage you to ask questions, both of you who are here in person, participating live, as well as online. We want to have that space for interaction and discussions. Without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Nina Stojkovic, who is the Undersecretary General here at the IFRC, on global relations, humanitarian diplomacy, and digitalization. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you very much, Nini, and of course very passionate about climate adaptation, and also the role that all of us here can have in addressing that particular challenge. On behalf of IFRC, I would like to welcome you all, the esteemed colleagues around the table who will be speakers later today, and also all of you in the audience and online for joining us to discuss this important topic. As you all know, IFRC is the largest volunteer-based humanitarian network in the world. It is present in every single country in the world through its national society, either Red Crescent or Red Cross National Society. And we work both on disaster response. As you know, a lot of those disasters are climate induced, where we help, we're proud to help 110 million people this year on disaster response. We also work on longer term, more resilience building programs where, again, we are able to reach 160 million people each year. So the impact of the organization through our members is huge. We have been collaborating with IUCN through the cross-network working group on nature-based solutions in humanitarian contexts since 2021. And I was very pleased last year at the COP27 to sign the MOU with colleagues from IUCN, where we said that let's make it not just another MOU. We wanted something really practical to come from this. And 1 year later, I'm very curious actually on how we are progressing, and I understand that there is some very interesting work being planned. Again, all of you in this room know that climate disasters are becoming more frequent and more intense, and the year 2023 will be remembered as one of the hottest years in the history, and we believe that this will also continue. Never before has climate change been so acutely felt by so many around the world, and biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse are one of the fastest deteriorating global risks over the next decade, with far-reaching and devastating economic and social consequences. We all know since the IPCC report that environmental and climate crisis is also a humanitarian crisis, and that's why we as humanitarian organization have stepped up to speak about it and also to try to do something about it. We see working with nature and nature-based solutions as part of integrated approach to climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, which of course has been the core area of focus, as I mentioned, for IFRC for many, many years. And we also recognize that nature-based solution benefits are cross-cutting through the humanitarian response, including, and I'm just mentioning some areas on food security and nutrition, water security and wash, and health. This is why last year at the COP27, IFRC launched its Global Climate Resilience Platform. This was an ambitious plan to reach 500 million people over the next 5 years through the work of our national societies, to raise 1 billion Swiss francs to do so in order to take our climate action at the community level to scale. And I'm very pleased to say that one of the 3 pillars of this platform is nature-based solutions, and our aim is to ensure that 100 national societies, the most impacted by climate in the next 5 years, harness the power of nature through nature-based solutions focused on reducing disaster risks and adapting to mitigation and mitigating climate change. So it is urgent that all organizations step up their efforts to address both climate and environmental crises, and I believe that that's the reason why we are here to talk about it together and to work on it together. I understand that we will be focusing on how best to address the interlinked nature, climate, humanitarian crisis, and the need for a common narrative, especially as we are going into the COP28 for tackling both climate emergency and humanitarian action. While nature-based solutions have been on the COP radar screen for a while, including through COP Nature Days and related declarations, this year we have a huge opportunity because for the first time, thanks in part to some of our efforts to influence the presidency, we'll host a Relief, Recovery and Peace Day, including a declaration on this issue. So there could not have been a better moment for us to gather together and to come up with a joint partnership on making an impact in these areas. And I wish all of us a really great and useful session today, and very much look forward to collaborating closely with all the colleagues in the room. Thank you very much, and back to you, Nini.
Thank you so much, Nina, for those opening words and really already starting to unpack why does a humanitarian organization like the IFRC really have as a top priority nature-based solutions. And that's really why we're here today. We want to be bringing together the environment sector and the humanitarian sector. So Charles Karangwa, who's the new global head of nature-based solutions at IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, is going to unpack that a bit more. Why are humanitarian environmental sectors partnering on nature-based solutions? And what's the specific role of nature-based solutions for the humanitarian sector, in particular in the context of strengthening climate and disaster resilience? So over to you, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and absolutely appreciate the welcome from Nena and of course Nini this afternoon. I think when I get into the room, I saw the panelists, and I was very pleased to be here with UNHCR, and I foresee probably the biggest or largest environmental humanitarian organizations in the world. And IUCN is the largest environmental network organizations with more than 1,500 members. So I think there's already a synergy and a powerful network that we are bringing on the table with other partners here present. And I think we have made a significant progress on this particular nexus of environment and humanitarian crisis since the United Nations Conference on Human Environment in 1972, the Rio Earth Summit in 92 itself, but also other numerous milestones since then. We can celebrate that this conference today is happening just 1 week plus before the COP28 in Abu Dhabi, and hopefully a way, also a pathway towards raising this particular conversation where it needs to be and considered in the global discussion. Nature and disasters are very much interlinked and interconnected, and climate change is the top driver of humanitarian emergencies. We don't need to give many examples. We see this every single day, from food crisis to water crisis, but also from flooding crisis to droughts. I come from East African country and I have worked in the Southern Africa for more than 10 years before, and I have experienced this and saw a lot of this link myself. And we cannot forget about the environmental degradation itself, which drives quite a catalytic burden that increased humanitarian crisis across different parts of the world. And times of war can just rapidly make it even worse when the environment is degraded, because it again adds the burden to the demand and the needs of addressing these crises jointly. An example of a recent one is where I was based in the last 7 years in Kenya, where more than 30% of the population and 70% of the national livestock herds are in constant threats because of the droughts. And I just remember last year alone, more than 3 million heads of livestock was completely lost because of droughts. And these are exactly how the environment connects to the humanitarian crisis. And we cannot underestimate the economic cost of this connection when it comes to our national GDPs and the overall development pathways. So as the impact of climate change becomes more visible and connected to other crises that we are facing, biodiversity crisis, but also pollution, which all together makes it even worse to existing challenges that the world is facing of poverty, etc. I think we need to start looking at how do we address this together. And historically, development and environment has been not necessarily connected sectors. There have always been a way of looking at conservation as a completely scientific and research, but more importantly, nature itself have not been significantly considered when we start addressing the interlinkage between these crises. And probably the time is now. We are now talking about nature-based solution within humanitarian context. But not only that, it is within even the climate crisis situation. It is within biodiversity crisis situation. There's a very strong link between all of those, and nature-based solution is probably the easy way to realize how we can jointly address this together. And as part of this broader solution, we are talking about reinforcing coordination and collaboration between environmental scholars, development practitioners, but also humanitarian response. And this should happen not only at that level, but also within the policy framework. And we have been discussing heavily with different countries that are developing national nature-based solution plans. And one of the key threats that is really being considered there is disasters, especially natural disasters from flooding to these droughts that we talked about that are worsening the demands and the increasing the humanitarian aspect. And I'm very pleased that IFRC and IUCN, together with other partners, UNHCR, but also others are really looking at this together. And our role is to raise this to the highest level where it should be, and absolutely start looking beyond just talking about it and signing MOUs, but more importantly, taking steps towards action to address these problems. And we look, as Nana said, to jointly continue to implement these solutions. One of the work that IUCN has been doing over the last years is to put out important tools and knowledge products that can help the community of practitioners to be able to uptake these solutions. And one of the recent one is the global standard on nature-based solutions, which helps basically define, but not only define the nature-based solution itself, but also help people understand what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. There's a huge cost of silos when we're addressing these problems separately. There's a lot of return when we start looking at an integrated way to address humanitarian crisis, which is very much linked to the environmental crisis. And I think this conversation this afternoon leads us to exactly taking actions, accelerating those coordination at different levels, not only at a community level. Community knows how to do this, but at the policy level, at the financing level, we need to start bringing those together as we collaboratively continue to seek how this can be addressed. IUCN is very committed to continue working with other partners to seek how nature-based solution can, more importantly, contribute significantly to addressing these challenges. And we look forward to absolutely this afternoon collaboration and conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles, for setting the scene a little bit for us. And we're going to move to the panel discussion. And before we do that, I'm just going to go quickly through. A number of you attended about 6 months ago. We had a joint workshop here on the new Sphere Nature-Based Solutions Guide. So it's a specific guide on how do humanitarians apply humanitarian principles in operations. And out of that workshop, we came up with a few messages that we felt that were higher level and that really should resonate. And I just want to frame those there as a bit of food for thought to the panel. So one is that, of course, we've heard from Charles in terms of how an environmental organization looks at it. What does this mean for humanitarian organizations like the UNHCR or IOM, IFRC? And at a very minimum, we need to be looking at the do no harm principle from an environmental perspective. So at a very minimum, humanitarian operations do not make the environmental situation, degrade the environment further. Ideally, we're starting to move away from that, in particular because we're looking at more complex and cascading crises. We're in a constant situation of one crisis upon another. We're also dealing in many protracted crises. In those kind of situations, nature-based solutions, so how we sustainably manage, conserve or restore ecosystems, can become relevant for populations who are becoming more permanent, even in a temporary situation. And so what's the role of nature-based solutions in protecting lives and providing for livelihoods? And also, if we're looking at the power of nature-based solutions in reducing disaster risks, how can we do that? And that obviously requires also this longer-term approaches for dealing with those disasters. Obviously, nature-based solutions need to be locally led. They need to support equity and effectiveness. And then two final points, and Charles, you very much referred to these already, the importance of cross-sectoral partnerships. Humanitarians are not going to become environmental experts. Environmental experts will not become humanitarian experts. How do we work on this together? And then the issue of lack of financing. So again, that came up. We have big figures on the climate gap. We have environmental gap that UNEP has put that we're missing about $230 billion per year in bridging that environmental gap. We have humanitarian funding gaps. What is, that's obviously very real in prohibiting the ability to act. How can we advocate for further financing and also non-siloed financing across climate, environmental and humanitarian areas? So with that, I would like to pass over to a quick presentation of our panelists, and then they'll each have a round for a few opening remarks and then open discussion. So we have Manuel Marques Pereira, who's the head of Migration, Environment, Climate Change and Risk Reduction at the IOM. Then we have Régis Farret, who is the Counselor for Sustainable Development at the Permanent Mission of France to the United Nations. We have Gautam Kemardey, who's the Counselor at the Permanent Mission of Bangladesh. And next to me, Andrew Harper is a Special Advisor on Climate Action at the UNHCR. So Gautam, I'd like to pass to you first to hear a little bit more about Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is, of course, often on the world map because of disasters. You're also a renowned climate pioneer globally and of environmental action. So what are some of your thoughts on how does a country like Bangladesh deal with both humanitarian and environmental crises at the same time, and potential synergies in dealing with these crises?
Hello. Thank you, Nini. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. Very good afternoon. As one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world, Bangladesh is at the tipping point of crisis. We have a carbon footprint of less than 0.6 tons per capita against the global average of 6.5 tons. However, extreme temperatures, erratic rainfall, flood and drought, even more intense tropical cyclones, sea level rise, increasing salinity, seasonal variations, and riverbank erosion are causing severe negative impacts on the lives and livelihoods of millions of people in my country. So, it comes no wonder that nature-based solutions have been practiced in Bangladesh many years ago. And if I illustrate, we have started the coastal afforestation activities in Bangladesh back in 1965. Since then, Bangladesh Forest Department has continued the practice and established plantations in 210,000 hectares of coastal area. This plantation prevent coastal erosion, traps sediment by slowing down the current, reducing the casualty and damage made by the natural disasters. 50% of our land is wetland. In wetland ecosystem, nature-based solution is practiced largely in the northern part of Bangladesh through wetland habitat restoration, reintroduction of locally rare or lost species, and watershed management to increase water availability, support food production and fisheries, enhanced wetland biodiversity. Decades ago, our government initiated the Protected Area Co-Management Scheme for different forest areas to involve local community in the implementation and management of NBS. We promote traditional practices to protect the human-environmental relationship. One such example is floating gardening, which is a traditional agricultural practice using plant materials to make floating rafts in waterlogged areas, enabling people to raise seedlings and grow vegetables in monsoon period. For policy level intervention, Bangladesh has several medium-term and short-term plans along with long-term visions for development planning, addressing climate change, protecting environment and conserving biodiversity. Bangladesh has adopted the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100, which envisions a long-term integrated and holistic approach towards environmental sustainability for Bangladesh. As you all know, for more than 6 years, Bangladesh has been hosting over 1.2 million Rohingyas who are displaced from Myanmar, from the Rakhine state of Myanmar. Along with other stakeholders and UN agencies, Bangladesh government has been providing humanitarian assistance to these refugee people. So we know Cox's Bazar is a hilly area and it is at high risk for landslides and flash flood. So Bangladesh government with other UN agencies have been working to reduce the risks of disasters, and we have doing these things very successfully, and we have reported that less casualties and damages have been done or caused by natural disasters in Cox's Bazar area. Since 2018, over 3,200 hectares of area have been again reforested with the help of UNHCR and with our forest department, so that the environment has been came back in its original situation. Moreover, to congest and de-risk the camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh government has recently built new shelters in Bhasanchar Island, and we are doing very good, providing better infrastructure in this island. And as of now, 33,000 Rohingyas have been voluntarily relocated from Cox's Bazar to this new island, Bhasanchar area. So these are the initiatives that Bangladesh government has taken in terms of the humanitarian context, and we are doing our best. And also, you also urge international community, NGOs, INGOs, and other stakeholders to come forward to help Bangladesh so that we can manage these things very efficiently. Finally, I also like to extend my warm gratitudes to the co-organizers for organizing such a nice event, and I hope this type of events will be organized in a regular basis. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Gautam, for sharing those thoughts and also very concrete examples of the work that's been carried out both in the coastal areas and the hill areas in Bangladesh, and the Cox's Bazar example, which I have a feeling will probably come back again in some of the future speaking points, where there are very interesting examples precisely of the role of nature-based solutions in protracted crises and refugee camps. So I would like to then hear from a very different perspective from France. Régis Farret, if you could share us a little bit. France have obviously been one of the champions of nature-based solutions for a long time. What are some of your thoughts on the economic, environmental, social dimensions of humanitarian crises and the potential of nature-based solutions?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Bonjour à tous. Je voudrais vous remercier très sincèrement les organisateurs pour cette réunion et d'avoir invité la France, qui a effectivement été toujours impliquée sur le sujet des solutions fondées sur la nature, et en particulier avec l'UICN. Don't worry, I will switch to English. I'm honored to speak after Bangladesh, who was able to express concrete concerns on solutions. They are emblematic of our challenges posed by climate change and also the biodiversity crisis. Let me remind you that our French President of the Republic visited this country in September, and adaptation and biodiversity challenges were at the heart of this discussion at that time. First of all, let's have a look at the causes. I think it's not necessary to remind you that climate change is increasing our risks. But not only extreme events such as storms or floods, but also more gradual phenomena such as drought episodes, or that can cause changes in biodiversity, or also meteorological changes that can alter the circulation of marine currents, and therefore marine biodiversity, hence also fishery resources, for instance. So we can see directly the consequence. It can be economic, because the fishing community will no longer have the same source of income. It can be, of course, because an agricultural area will be profoundly altered. And it can also be social or even humanitarian consequences, because it can disrupt traditional know-hows and even lead to population displacements. So this is the first illustration of the strong interaction between environment, society, and economy. And this is what I would like to have as a red thread of this intervention. Here I'd like to mention the work of the Platform on Disaster Displacement, because it is not just another intervention. I have 3 phones, so it will be difficult. Okay, let's have a try. So yeah, so the Platform on Disaster Displacement is not only an international organization. It's not an international organization. It's a platform for pooling skills and providing support to help countries, our local communities, to prevent migration or to better manage these consequences. So France is honored to be one of the founding members of this platform, and we are co-chairing the subgroup devoted to climate and migration. That is, we co-chair it with Bangladesh, actually. So we particularly appreciate this approach of the PDD for the climate, migration, humanitarian nexus, and its agility. I could also mention the fact that we will be organizing early next year the Global Forum on Migration and Development and Displacement, which will take place here in Geneva in the Centre des Congrès. Sorry. So it happens every year, but it will be inviting all countries. So you are very welcome, and also all NGOs. And the key topic, will be climate and migrations. Now, coming back to nature-based solutions, they are a way of managing and preventing all this. And as it was said already, but I would like to insist, a nature-based solution is not only a way of managing ecosystems and restoring ecosystems, it's also a way of ensuring an added value for the society and for human well-being, and also for economy. So definitely, nature-based solutions are part of the solution, and France is it's a priority for France that this idea of having a co-benefit, having an added value for economy and well-being is essential. So it's ecosystems and well-being and economy and social. And France has always seen it as a priority and a common tool that can be used to develop conventions between climate and biodiversity with co-benefits. This is the first illustration of these conventions between environment, society, and economy. And we are taking care because there are some deviations. It could be in some locations, it could be that project is implementing monoculture trees to enhance carbon capture, but in that way they would endanger local ecosystems. So we have to be cautious and to promote clear criteria. We support a concept for nature-based solution that is faithful to the resolution of the UN Assembly last year, the Environment Assembly last year, and was defined with the help of IUCN, with a particular attention to the respect of social and environmental guarantees. And also, important to mention, with a clear link to local communities, indigenous people, and local know-how in order to manage the projects and to ensure also their long-term resilience. Going to more concrete examples, the French AFD, so Agence Française du Développement, has set a target of 30% of French climate finance to be backed by biodiversity co-benefits. This includes, of course, nature-based solutions. Maybe this scheme could be replicated by other development agencies. Last year, this agency supported 18 projects. And one example is the Kiwa initiative, developed in the Pacific Island states and territories, including French overseas territories, but not only. And it has been developed into a unique partnership driven by France and the European Union, but also involving Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Of course, you have other examples in other countries. I will not describe all of them. And let me have a final word on prevention again, because it makes me think of the fact that we should address and warn and alert about these climate events. I'm talking here about early warning systems. You know that last year UN launched an early warning for all initiative. And before that, already in 2015, France had launched a cruise initiative that is devoted to early warning and climate risk, especially devoted to vulnerable states. And its goal is to build capacity across the entire chain. Hydrometeorological forecasting, also dissemination of warnings to relevant stakeholders on the field, and risk management and preparedness. Concrete actions are undertaken all over the world, and CRUISE currently has 12 contributing states, plus observers, and it's one example of the actions that we should have to prevent on the field. It's in addition to our commitment to promote nature-based solutions, and France is very happy to play its part in such mechanisms, but also here in Geneva, in taking into account the convergence between environment, social, and humanitarian issues. Thank you for this opportunity. To combine these dimensions is not always easy, but it's necessary. And to do this, we need to walk on 2 feet. First, think global, and secondly, act local. I think that's what we need to do and to illustrate here this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Régie, pour ces mots et beaucoup de points intéressants sur différents thèmes sur les solutions basées sur la nature. And you already picked up on some of the themes that we'll be coming back to on displacement and migration. I'll pass those over to Manuel, but I think I'll pass over to Andrew first. And for Andrew, already we heard from Gautam of some of the ongoing work of UNHCR in Cox's Bazar around reforestation, some of that work. And we'd be interested to hear both on that work in general terms, but what do you think about the linkages in protecting nature and protecting refugees? Are there linkages? What's the potential? What might be some of the challenges? And I can pass over my microphone.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. I think it's even more than just like having refugees, because I think it's much bigger than that. Because when we talk about responses and we talk about sort of thinking globally but acting local, like acting locally has to be much bigger than sort of like having photo opportunities of projects. And that's what you see. You see, whenever you go out to the field, you see some good examples, but they're not at the scale that's required. And when I talk about scale, like the world's losing anywhere between 12 and 20 million hectares of land per year. And just like countries like Niger, for instance, they're losing about 200,000 hectares. So we're nowhere near coming up with any solutions. Like we're sort of touching around the edges, but there's no way which we're being serious about it. And so until we're serious about it, then we will be responding in a humanitarian way, because there's just going to be more and more crises. And we're going to fail because the numbers of people who are going to be in need, not just refugees who've been displaced, the host communities, everyone who's living in these marginal areas. So I think also the example of working with IUCN and Bangladesh is also a good example, because it's not just climate change. It is very much about biodiversity. It's about land, air, and sea, all the issues there. It's about pollution. But it also raised one of the challenges that we've got, that if you have 100,000 people, if you have 500,000 people, if you have 1 million people come into somebody's country and use their water, cut their trees, pollute the area, the welcome mat does not stay for very long. So it is like, you're saying that humanitarians cannot be environmentalists. Absolutely, we have to be. There is absolutely no choice about that. Just like humanitarians also have to be development experts too, because you're not going to resolve the issues of climate change or nature having the approach which we have, which does not work. So we have to be linked in with the countries themselves, with development agencies, but also if you're looking at solutions, they have to be also people might get angry with me, but have to have a private sector asset-based element to it as well. Because if you don't have that, it won't be sustainable. Humanitarians are not good at providing sustainable solutions. Development is not very good at providing anything other than infrastructure, but then you need to have the populations engaged to come up with that element. A challenge which we have, and again looking at Cox's Bazar, and something which we were confronted with and continue to be confronted with, is that one of the reasons why the trees kept growing was that we provided LPG gas. So we are, and I take absolutely no sort of backward steps here, we are a protection agency. We protect people. We don't protect trees. We do a really lousy job at protecting trees. There's about 25 million trees being cut down in refugee areas around the world. So we replace about 1 million or 2. So if you want to bank with us on that, it doesn't work. But what we do believe in is that we need to plant 30, 40, 50, 60 million trees, because that's the only way that we can protect people. Because if you have refugees going into, from Sudan going into Chad, we've had 400,000. We probably expect 1 million sometime next year. They're going into one of the most climate, environmentally sensitive areas in the world. What are we doing in terms of environmental protection? Absolutely very little. I can't say nothing because I'll get into trouble, but very little commensurate with the needs. So if you're from Chad and you've got Sudan next door, or in your Kenya or your Ethiopia, how welcoming are you of refugees? So the overall international refugee protection framework is reliant on us doing a better job in terms of nature-based solutions. So we may not have necessarily been up to the standard in the past, but we've got no choice to be climate experts, having collaboration with IUCN, having collaboration with development actors, having collaboration with the World Bank. Everyone who starts becoming a little bit more interested in sort of looking at scale and solutions, because we've got no choice.
Thank you very much for that, and I think raising very important points for us, both in breaking silos sector-wise, in the hybrid approaches we need, and the diverse funding sources we need. So we're really looking at more systemic solutions than small projectized, individualized approaches, and really the scale that is facing us is the scale that we need to respond with and prepare for. So thanks a lot, very thought-provoking. Building a little bit on that, Manuel, I'd like to pass over for you for some, as the last but not least speaker on the panel. The topic of climate and migration already came up, and of displacement. How do you see it at the IOM, and in particular bringing in this nature environment angle into your work? And what do you see, you know, both of some of the drivers that environment has and some of the solutions it can provide in terms of migration and displacement challenges?
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. This poses to me a problem because I took some notes here and I was ready to say something, but then you guys throw Cox's Bazar at me, and that touches deep in my heart. I managed the IOM operation for 3.5 years in Cox's Bazar. I helped build these camps and work very closely with UNHCR. And it would be a missed opportunity not to come here and talk about the challenges and the successes of that, because I think Cox's Bazar is the perfect example of the worst case scenario turned into the best situation possible, because willingness, money, restrictions, and space to negotiate happened. No disaster is natural. Disasters are social economical phenomena and need to be treated as such, and is the vulnerabilities of communities and individuals vis-a-vis hazards that should be managed and for which we should reduce exposure, and we should create more resilience of people that need to be addressed. So working against nature is a problem, right? When we cut mangroves in areas prone to cyclones, then we need to do reconstruction because the surge storm is stronger. When communities have livelihoods that are based on deforestation of slopes, we have mudslides, we have floods. So it's the other way around. First, the part of working with communities and governments in areas at risk to build adaptation that is resilient, so that the people that want to stay can stay in safety and with the resources to do so, there will be a group of people that for sure wants to leave because it should be their choice. And so the right to choose about mobility is something that IOM is pointing very strongly in these considerations, including next week for the COP. But the right to stay, and where nature-based solutions collide with that right, is, I think, one of the biggest things that humanitarians have to come to terms. Have to come to terms in terms of the prevention, that if we work on this regard before things a disaster happens, we are avoiding humanitarian needs. So we will then have humanitarian money for things that are a most pressing humanitarian need. And on the other side, when we are doing humanitarian, we also need to do things different. Cox's Bazar had a significant number of restrictions by the government of Bangladesh that were due, because the government of Bangladesh is sovereign and has the right to protect his land, and their citizens, and Cox's Bazar was a protected park. So when 1 million people came in and cut all the forest to do squalid accommodations, the first year was very difficult because there was nothing to break the wind, nothing to stop the water from creating more erosions, and as our colleague said, unfortunately creating more fatalities. But working with humanitarians and the government on restrictions and solutions, nature-based solutions played a key role. But the fact that nature-based solutions in Cox's Bazar took place was not because of this. Was because donors stopped thinking on value for money and the things they know from other practices, so they were willing to invest with risk in doing things different. Because me asking $400,000 to plant grass in the camps of Cox's Bazar would be unthinkable in any other area of the world. But in Cox's Bazar, $400,000 and 2 million bales of vetiver grass would allow to protect the slopes of the majority of the camps. Convincing donors to pay 500 hectares of reforestation outside of the camps to compensate the forest cut in the camps was acceptable. The gas that Andrew talked, yes, it's just on the IOM, well, it's 100,000, no, 200,000 gas canisters a month to keep the forest from Cox's Bazar not to be cut to the ground. This is a very large amount of money to maintain the quality of life of the refugees, to keep the peace with the host communities, and to ensure that the ecosystem is preserved. And this was only possible because there was a significant mindset. And that applied to everything, because when we start doing sanitation systems that were not buried in the ground and in concrete, but in tanks above ground in plastic that could be removed when people one day, if they one day leave, that was a very big transformation. Everyone wanted to do a hole on the ground, to do a tank to treat sewage. When we start doing it different, when donors were willing to take money and create a plastic factory, when donors were willing to invest $500,000 and build a bamboo treatment facility that treats 60,000 poles of bamboo so that we don't need to cut bamboo in the north and we don't need to replace the bamboo every 3 months. So this is a change in the way we do things. It's possible, requires the political will, the space of the humanitarians to use nature-based solutions and think on that footprint. And third, it also needs this financing component on the long-term view. Planting trees in Cox's Bazar is a gift for the future of the country, but now protects the refugees and helps the host communities to be safe from cyclones. So I will end here. There's 1,000 examples between you. We are just exporting the floating gardens of Bangladesh to South Sudan because the Sud is more flooded than ever and people cannot plant anything. So let's try and do like in Bangladesh and plant on floating gardens. There is many of this cross fertilization between operations that we can do, especially with nature-based solutions, but we need the practitioners, the communities, and the donors to agree that this is important and there are other ways, more greener, for a better future to do things. I'm a bit of an eco-militant, so apologies for this, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Manuel, for that, and thank you for taking on Cox's Bazar, although it wasn't your original plan. I think that really nicely tied together and very concretely a number of the themes we'd been discussing, in addition to finding some very concrete recommendations. I really liked that idea of the political will, the space, and the longer-term funding needed for some of these solutions. We're now moving to the discussion and questions segment of the event. So I have some questions coming in from our online speakers, which Daniela is feeding to me through my phone. So I'm not just reading my messages for fun here, but actually getting questions, and then we'll open to the floor of participants as well. So one of the questions that I see coming through is what are some of the major challenges, Gautam, in terms of adopting nature-based solutions in Bhasan Char specifically? I think there's a participant who knows on that. Is that something you would be able to reflect upon? Are you familiar with that context?
Let me try. Thank you for asking the questions. As I mentioned in my intervention that due to make the de-risk and decongest the Cox's Bazar camp, this is the largest camp in the world for the refugees. So our government taken the decision to relocate a portion of Rohingyas to a separate area. As Bangladesh is the largest populated country in the world, so it's not possible for us to relocate them in a what should I say, in a populated area or in a residential area. So we picked up an island, and it's a decision for several years. And government took several initiatives based on nature-based solutions to develop it, to make it a perfect resettlement place. For example, we did mangrove forestation as a four-stage protection system, and one of the belt is built only for to protect flood, as it's in the coastal area. So four-stage protection system, and apart from this, we built flood defense embankment surrounding the entire island, that is island of 25 square kilometer. And this flood embankment ranges from 9 feet to 19 feet to across the island. Moreover, there are around 1,500 houses for the Rohingya people. Among them, 120 are multi-purpose cyclone center. And I think if you follow the media, and you will see that there are several cyclones that hit the coastal area of Bangladesh, including this Bhasan Char. But for last 3 years, there is no report of casualty and damage to this shelter and facilities provided to the Rohingyas. In this Bhasan Char area, as of now, around 33,000 Rohingyas have been relocated from Cox's Bazar, and that is on voluntary basis. And we have built it, the houses with the solar panel in roof of each house, so that it will contribute to the energy contribution of the people of the Rohingyas residing in Bhasan Char area. There are many open spaces, and Rohingya people are encouraged to do livelihood and skill development opportunities to engage with various activities. And you know, along with Bangladesh government, UNHCR and other UN agencies are also providing humanitarian response to these people. So there are ample opportunities, and there are wide area, as I have mentioned. Space is the biggest problem in the Rohingya camps in Cox's Bazar. So that is not a problem in Bhasan Char. So Rohingya people are engaging themselves in harvesting crops, vegetables. Even they are doing the fishing in the sea area, and that is also linked with their long tradition. The Rohingya people, they Larger portion of Rohingya people, they are engaged in fishing tradition in Rakhine. So it will help them when they will return back to their homeland. It will help them to reintegrate in Myanmar. And also for the Rohingya women, I think they are also doing right now, they are doing the poultry farming, the duck farming, and cattle farming like cows and buffaloes. So it was not possible in Cox's Bazar because of the space congestion. But in Bashanchar, this is a huge opportunity for Rohingya men, women, and also for the kids. There are learning centers, lots of learning centers, and there are now a hospital for providing healthcare. So what are the challenges? The challenges is that we are facing finances, we are facing modern technologies, we are facing experts to provide them good health, to provide them better sanitation, waste management system. So we urge international communities, NGOs, INGOs to come up and invest so that these displaced people can lead a good life and can keep their hope to return to their homeland. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Extremely interesting example on relocation and what that can look like, and that range again of solutions that were needed and brought together in Basan Shah. So thanks a lot for sharing that. I'd like to see if there's any questions from the audience. And if you want to ask a question, please do introduce yourself as well briefly. I think colleagues, do we have an extra microphone? Is there anyone who would like to ask a question to any of the panelists? The lady there at the back, please.
Hi, my name is Melissa. I was wondering what you think about organizations like Shelterbox that have huge square plastic boxes that contain large tents that essentially get left in the environment after the crisis is over.
Yes, Manuel.
I think that's a very good question on packaging. But the truth is, the shelter box is made of stirred polyester, right, or plastic, hard plastic. There is no one in a disaster setting that does not give an arm and a leg to have that box to save their belongings. I have never, and that's me, seen a box left that is not being used. I personally have one that was given to me and it goes with me around the world because it allows people to safeguard their belongings. And I think this is a good example, and that's where I'm going, because it's a good example on how when we are creating a product for someone in a situation in many times that they have lost everything, to create the product thinking on them, on all the parts that they can use. People use plastic sheeting, which is a problem, but is the best solution we have due to its versatility for everything. We have seen in the floods in 2022, people in Pakistan pulling the plastic sheet that we had given to them in 2010 because they cleaned it, they stored it, it only comes out when it's needed. So if we put life cycle of product to the service of people and we create multi-uses, that is a good thing. For example, the solar lanterns of UNHCR, those that look like a bell, it's a speaker, a bell, a headlamp, a neck lamp, that is done and people use that. I think packaging and this conscious of the environment, it's very important. And if we can multiply the uses of the assistance humanitarians do and multiply the ways in which the environment benefits from those services and these products, then we are advancing, right? It's like the gas and the forest. The gas and the forest are very important, but the fact that people use gas in the house takes smoke from women, children, and the ones that do the chores in the house. It's a cleaner environment for them. It's much healthier for their health in the future. So if we need to scale these complementarities between what we do. And I think the packaging is a very interesting one. Design usually is for rich people, and design should be for the people that need the most, right? The 1% gets 90% of the design, the 90% get 1% of that because it's cost effective, is value for money, is we need to save and we can, you know, assist 2 people with half a plastic sheeting. And if this means more people on a report of a donor, then that's good. This is where we need to start cutting. Sorry, today is the militant day, so I'm a bit...
Thank you, Manuel. I think, Andrew, you wanted to reflect on that as well.
I'll be the peacemaker. And this is probably the key element here is the humanitarian context. And as Manuel will say, like, we'd all like to be doing a better job in reducing the environmental impact. And we're all going through rewriting our strategies, looking at collective action to do that. And we're also working with IFRC, and I think with IOM as well, trying to figure out how can we reduce the packaging, for instance. So realistic context, 400,000 people leave from Sudan to Chad. We're probably expecting, as I mentioned, another 600,000. We'd like to have things which are more environmentally sensitive, but there's nothing that can provide shelter for people than plastic. And like I was on the board with Somalia a month ago, and we didn't even have anything other than plastic. Like we couldn't even provide the struts or the frames to provide plastic shelters. So it's really a situation that there's almost like we're running on parallel tracks almost. Like there's a discussion in terms of what we want, and there's a discussion about what we can do. And what we're seeing at the moment, this is where it's really scary, is that the impacts of climate change, land degradation, conflict is going to just continually increase the numbers of people in need. But what we're seeing is a reduction in per capita support for humanitarian access and assistance. It's not changing. Like the money that we're talking about in terms of climate financing, it will be diverted from development. It will. So this is one of the reasons why we're trying to get out ahead of it and sort of say, how can we be much smarter in bringing on board other actors to do more than what they should be doing. So again, it's not necessarily a humanitarian response, it's a development response. But one thing which we can be looking at is focusing not just on the carbon emissions, looking at the environmental impact. One of the big issues that we had with the IKEA Foundation was like, and no one is more environmentally sensitive than IKEA, generally, is that, certainly the foundation, was that they came up with the RHUs, these refugee housing units, but they're made of plastic, but they protected people. So in the end, and this is what I started off with, we are a protection agency. And if it gets people out of harm's way, and it can provide a degree of security for women and children, then we'll opt for that. The environment will be the secondary element.
Thanks a lot both for tackling that and from slightly different angles. And I noticed that someone in the chat was saying that not all of this, if we're talking about solar panels or packaging, we're talking about nature-based solutions, but I think the point we're addressing is as well this need for hybrid solutions and this tensions between environment and protecting people and that nexus area. So yeah, still a very interesting contribution to this conversation, I find. I'll take one more question from the audience. I think the lady in the front, her first name, will take another one online, and then we'll come back again to the room. Thanks. So the lady up here on the left.
Thank you very much for this amazing panel. It has been super interesting because exactly it's interconnecting things that usually we work separately and see the interlinks, and that is a new complexity. So in that context, and taking the few reflections that we have been addressing, for instance, Mr. Charles, in a point you mentioned that UECN is developing these standards to define how and what we to consider or not nature-based solutions. And taking the words of Mr. Regis from France, also the call to be cautious in what we consider or not, and gave the example of monoculture and some solutions that in common you have found. We need to plant more trees, and that can be a good solution. So in that context, for instance, is what are like the key aspects to define what is a nature-based solution or not in a context, for instance, of plantations, and taking the word also of Mr. Manuel Marquez, taking attention to the ecosystem and the need of financing, how we can address the challenge that when we talk about environment, from time to time, and if we want to keep or restore and also provide an economy that can bring shelter to the people that live there. So the challenge of sustainability, to interlink those, and from time to time, the need to think also and do differently, because how, in some aspect, how we have been doing is not working. So how, if one of you, Mr. Charles, Mr. Manuel, Regis, Andrew, could address this? Thanks.
So I think maybe we'll pass Regis or Charles. You haven't spoken yet in the question section. Would either of you or both like to tackle that question?
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely a very brilliant question, and no one have actually ever said the statement that nature-based solution is everything. I want to come back to what Andrew said. Nature-based solutions, number one, as you rightly said, there's a lot of confusion of monoculture. Is it NBS? Is some of other solutions that just reduce climate mitigations and BS? And monoculture, from the definition, is not in BS in itself. Nature-based solution actions, of course, to restore, protect, or conserve, or sustainable use. But there are a couple of nuances there. You are addressing society challenges, but also you are significantly improving biodiversity outcomes. And some of these monoculture, we have been very, very careful, because not every monoculture of pines or eucalyptus brings returns on biodiversity. Most of them actually negatively can make it worse. But we are not saying if a company is doing a plantation of timber, we need timber for industry. We are not going to call it nature-based solution, but it's going to be a huge contribution to the biomass demand, meeting the demand on the biomass. In many countries, the demand of biomass, and we are not going to immediately have the liquefied gas tomorrow for 82 or 90% of the population that are using firewood in Sudan or in Chad. I worked for UNHCR in Chad, so I know the context very well. We are not going to immediately say that the demand for construction that comes out of timber is not just going to be made by technology out of the blue. We need some transition time. But we are very careful to just say that is nature-based solutions. And that's why it's good to mirror this to existing. Only nature-based solution is standard of IUCN in the market. We don't have any other one at the moment. So if we want to look at what it is, there's 8 criteria which helps at least understand if it is really a nature-based solutions. And as I said, a couple of nuances are there. And I just wanted also to reiterate on a number of points here. Again, we need nature-based solutions. We need nature to help address all these questions that Manuel have mentioned. We need nature to build the resilience of communities. But we need great infrastructure to reduce speed of some of the floods. We need retention walls, as engineers needs to do their work. So we need to look at that, but at the same time, the cost of built infrastructure in humanitarian context has proven to be super, super expensive. And we have this case of Cox's Bazar. Imagine if we had to stop erosion and landslides by building concretes on sea level, on the sea shore, and that wouldn't have happened and would have costed billions. So we need gray infrastructure. We need green infrastructure, but we need ecological infrastructure that helps really protect and reduce the loss of biodiversity. And that's very important. And that's where we look at that synergy or combined solution. And finally, and then I will pass to Regis. I think there is a nuance here that have been made across different speakers, which I really like very much. It's this leverage on partnerships and knowledge. I mean, as I said, I worked for UNHCR before, but I worked also for governments. And what I have learned is not one partner can do everything. So we need to leverage on that broad spectrum of partnership and innovate how we can actually address these problems collaboratively and in partnerships.
Super, thanks a lot, Charles, for those reflections. And Regis, over to you.
Merci. I try to be brief. Some principles were defined at the national level, which is nice and new. It was not obvious, and we have to thank IUCN for this, for making great efforts in research, in defining nature-based solutions, and in promoting, consulting, and getting countries and NGOs together, and also other actors. So yes, there are some principles that are defined at international level to decide if we have a nature-based solution or not. Now, having said that, of course, it has to be defined more clearly and more precisely at the local level, at national level, and that is what we have been doing in France, for instance. We define some very precise criteria. These criteria are about the impact of the action, about the benefits, about the long-term benefits, about how it is implemented, because it has to be implemented in collaboration with local authorities and local people. All these kind of criteria. It's important, of course, it's essential, and of course it's easy to say that yes, if we have a gray infrastructure, it's probably not completely nature-based solution, a wall to prevent a flood. It would be better to restore the banks of the river with ecological and green engineering, of course. Of course, it's easy to say that we have to plant forest to prevent flood, because we will restore the buffering capacity of soils, and because we will create. We have to also if we plant a forest, we have to respect biodiversity, to have a local ecosystem that is sustainable, and that will also have a specific climate and will be less sensitive to drought and so on. So. All this is easy to say, but yes, it has to be defined locally, and we have to be careful not to go too far into new debates on this criteria, because we can see nowadays that most of the initiatives that are aiming at modifying or adapting these criteria, these principles, most of these initiatives are aiming at weakening them, not necessarily on purpose, but yes, we have to be strict and ambitious on this.
Super, thanks a lot, Regis. And in the interest of time, I'd like to move to pick a couple of questions from the online audience. We have over 100 people online. And for our colleagues in the room, we do have a drinks afterwards, if you remember. So hopefully that's an occasion to have some direct conversation and discussion with our esteemed panelists in person as well. So from the online conversation, and I think this is maybe Manuel or Andrew, open as well to whoever else might want to take it, but a question on, if we hear some of these excellent or positive examples from Cox's Bazar on some of the nature-based solutions, what are the challenges in taking these and replicating them in other camps and settlements, such as northern Nigeria, in Syria, etc.? Is it donor financing? Is it a capacity issue of clusters or camp managers? Is it perhaps something else? why, if we hear these good examples, why are we all talking about Cox's Bazar? Or is it, are there limits to replicating it, or are we just not sharing maybe some of the other examples?
I think money is a huge issue. I think the profile, obviously the government was very conducive. I think IOM and UNHCR and UNICEF and WFP and IUCN and obviously the Red Crescent, we all worked well together. I think it was leadership mainly, but we're being faced now with a situation where I think when, and correct me, Manuel, when that was happening, but there wasn't that many other emergencies right at that time. You obviously had the Syria crisis going on, but that was sort of winding down a bit. But at the moment, what we're seeing is just one crisis after another, and none of them are being resolved. And so we're stretched really thin in terms of not only donor support, but also in terms of capacity. And it also rains in Cox's Bazar, which also helps a lot in terms of growing trees. But it can be sort of replicated elsewhere. Like if you can, even in the Sahel, if you can protect the land from goats, things will regrow. But it's that issue of sort of like having governance, and governance is often not necessarily taken fully into account when we're talking about the environment. But unless you have proper governance, unless you also have education linked to that, then land is being used as an exploitable asset without an end. But there is an end.
I said the other parts, which are exactly, I'm a firm believer on the issues of finance, but it's also a question of good programming, right? Good programming is not do the things that you copy paste from a BOQ or a book that someone published God knows where. Is grabbing that example, contextualizing it, and making it happen in the best way for the persons that we are serving. And we, the humanitarians, are being pressured to deliver photocopies of operations at a certain cost to reach a certain number of people, and then we lose this subtlety. Because the decisions in Cox's Bazar were all based on the need to preserve the hills. This photo is very beautiful and tragic in many ways, but Cox's Bazar is just up and down hills. We could not cut the hills to make it flat. It was literally like working in a slum in South America instead of a flat slum in Southeast Asia. And that notion of the verticality challenged everything that people knew how to do. So people were in a position that they were open to discuss how do you do sanitation on the top of the hill without creating a problem for the people on the bottom of the hill? How do you create an access up the hill without cutting the hill? We terraced, we flattened hills. Government of Bangladesh should not listen to this, just a little number. We did terraces on other hills. We worked with the forest department to find the most suitable ways. When the Prime Minister agreed to expand the camp, we negotiated with the government and the Ministry of Forest which was the best area, which was the area that was less sensitive from an environmental point of view, because everyone was willing to work outside of the box, to do programming and not just a copy paste. And I cannot stress to people, including the people that I work with, that programming, that serving dignity of the people that we are trying to support and meeting their needs, the effort is ours. We are the ones that have to bend the budgets. We are the ones that have to convince the donors. We should not, the things we are doing need to serve dignity, their protection, and preferably the environment too. And I think this mindset is what we, so stretched that we are with crises, need to start applying more. But that's my personal reflection. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much, Manuel, for that. And willingness to think outside of the box, I think, sums up a little bit of some of what we've been trying to come up with today, and the importance of going out of our comfort zones to collaborate. We're coming towards the end of a session. I'd like to give each of the panelists maybe just one takeaway or one reflection that you've come up with during this conversation, listening to your colleagues and some of the questions. What's one key takeaway here, and what will you be thinking about as you walk down the stairs to the cocktail afterwards? Any volunteers for starting? Otherwise, I'll assign. Andrew.
I think just going into COP where there's just so much focus on climate, and climate is not, like, biodiversity is probably going to be the one which destroys society first. So, like, we need to be looking at trying to raise expand people's understanding of what nature is. It's not just climate.
Yeah, I think I already mentioned a couple of things. One is this leverage on innovating partnerships on how to deal with these situations, and we cannot underestimate anymore the role of nature in addressing this crisis and reducing the cost of what we are investing in humanitarian solutions.
So my thinking is also in line with the Charles, that collaboration should be enhanced to give more protection in humanitarian context. And nature is the best protector. So we have to build up solutions on nature. Thank you.
These are such wise words, it's difficult to take over. But I will keep on my idea of walking on two legs. So first pair of legs for me is prevention and protection. The second pair of legs is, as I said, think global, and we are very good here to think globally and have nice principles and discuss in Geneva and make things progress at the international level, but also act local. And I very, very appreciate and I congratulate my neighbors for their tremendous action on the field, which is very, very needed, and their experience can be capitalized, and it will be, and not only in a humanitarian, but also other challenges. Thank you so much.
I think that what usually when I talk about these things gets on my mind and it lingers there is this dilemma of everything in nature decays. That is how the system works. So everything we try to do to protect people is counter-natural, right? So like plastic sheeting. The plastic sheeting is weak, is more susceptible to be degraded and to get ruined, so people will be more exposed. So it's this balance that I think is very difficult and we need to have in mind, is between protecting nature and saving lives in humanitarian contexts is always a moment of reflection and a moment of trying to make the least of the evils, noting that some of those you should compensate after. So this notion of balance and then compensating when possible to favor environment, I think this is something that needs to linger in people's mind. That would be my thinking down the stairs with the other ideas.
Super, thank you so much on those reflections. Biodiversity, not just climate, in the lead up to COP, there's an important message for us, and much beyond, indeed. It's not all about climate. Partnerships and collaboration, thinking global, acting local, very important for us to remember that sitting here, this nice room in Geneva, looking at the Alps there, the importance of prevention and protection. I really like this idea of this dichotomy. How do we bring that balance of protection, nature and people, and how do we deal with those trade-offs? So thank you for those thoughts. A big thank you to all of our participants, for all our esteemed panelists. Could I ask for a round of applause for the panelists, please? A big thank you also to our co-organizers, the Geneva Environment Network and IUCN. Before I close up, I don't know if our co-organizers, anyone from IUCN, want to say a couple of final remarks? Veronica at the back, who's been one of the spearheaders of this event, alongside with Natalie from IFRC and Daniela from GEN. Ladies, any final comments from you?
Spanish voice is not enough. I need the mic. So I would like to thank you to all of you for joining today, also for the audience online. I have to say a big thanks to Natalie, to IFRC for all the work that we have been doing these 2 past years in making this possible. And especially, this is also on a personal note, I would like to thank 2 colleagues working in Cox's Bazar. I think also this started from there. Well, Manuel has been saying much, but especially thanks to Energy and Environment Cluster. Thanks to them, part of this work has been possible. Fenella Howard and our PR Rakif from IUCN, we make this possible, and now we are here going together to COP28. But I would like to play a little bit the devil's advocate, perhaps. We are saying like we are willing to collaborate, partnerships in place. We have strong policy frameworks. Sorry. The charter is there. The enact partnership on nature-based solutions. We have the sphere on paid guidance on nature-based solutions. So why is this not happening more often? Why we are not working together? Are we still checking the box for donors, or what is happening that we cannot move forward? So maybe now we are going through a drink or 2. So maybe this is time to talk about this.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. So that's our overall message. How will we collaborate more? And you can answer that either after 1 or 2 drinks, but everyone should give us an answer before the end of the evening. So thank you, everyone. And the drinks will be just when we go downstairs. We came in through the main entrance. There's a little sofa area, so we'll gather there. And we'll see you there. Thank you, everyone.